r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. 112 or 911 operators of Reddit. What's the worst or saddest call you got? Aside from the stuff others already listed, like the CPR calls or being the last person someone talks to, which personally don't bother me much, there are some that have just stuck with me for various reasons. One was a call from a guy who had just shot his brother moments before the call. From what he said, his brother had some mental issues, and during an argument the brother snapped and started attacking the caller with a knife. The caller, not wanting to die, shot him in self-defense. What struck me in particular was the caller's tone of voice on the call. It's not something I feel like I can properly describe in words, but it was something like complete and utter despair for the whole situation. He truly did not want to kill his brother. Another was from an elderly caller that sounded a bit confused and nervous. She said she had been driving for 12+ hours to get to a meeting at a conference center, but needed help with directions for the last bit to find it. The conference center name wasn't ringing a bell for me, and after some digging I found out that it was a couple states over. After it clicked and I realized she thinks she's in a different state, I made the mistake of telling her what state she's actually in, and that was the last bit of actual conversation we had. Everything past that was complete, pure hysterics. I guess she must have realized how much her mind was starting to fail her and just couldn't deal with it. With other hysterical callers, I've always been able to calm them down or at least get a few words out of them here and there, but there was absolutely nothing I could do for this lady. On top of that, she was in the middle of nowhere in the farmland part of the county, so a police response would take a long time on top of the lack of a specific location for her better than where the phone was hitting. Fortunately, some random passerby was a hero. Despite it being the middle of the night, he stopped, checked on her, and even took the phone from her to see who she was talking to. He gave me all the info I needed and even kept her company until the officers arrived. So while I can still remember the abject terror in her voice as she realized her mind was starting to fail her, it also restored a bit of my faith in humanity at the same time. Not an emergency service operator, but I worked for the retention department for a major cell phone company years ago. I got a call from this middle-aged sounding lady who told me she wanted to cancel her line entirely. For my job, I asked her why she wants to cancel, to try to offer solutions or to straight up bribe her into not canceling. And she said, "I'm dying soon and I won't need my cell phone in hospice." I had to reach out to my supervisor to get approval to cancel the line for account holder death, and he told me I had to warn her that she'd never be able to open another line with the company. She said, "That doesn't really matter anymore." I felt awful saying it and told her I was so sorry she was going through it. She started sobbing and said, "Me too. I don't want to die." I still remember how her voice was shuddering when she said it. It really broke my heart. We started talking while I was waiting for the supervisor to do his override. She talked about how she was trying to deal with loose ends as best as she could to make it easier on her daughter who had just had a baby. About how she was worried about her dog not adjusting as he was a senior dog and he'd been with her since he was a puppy. She said she hoped it didn't hurt too much before she went. I let her talk until she didn't have anything else to say, and she thanked me at the end and said she was sorry if she burdened me. I told her it was okay. She deserved to be heard and we said goodbye. I cried in the bathroom for about 20 minutes after we hung up. Edit. Thank you for my first award. My aunt used to be a 911 operator in a small town. She said the worst was a call that she didn't get. She worked night shift with one other woman and 2 calls came in at once. One was a car accident and the one on my aunt's line was a woman complaining that her street wasn't plowed. She talked to her for a while to calm her down, but in the meantime, a 3rd call was missed. It had been a teenage girl calling because her stepfather was beating up her mother. She disconnected before my aunt could switch lines. Back then, there was no voicemail, but she called back and a man answered, saying she called by mistake. The stepfather ended up shooting the mother and her 2 kids, but the kicker is that it wasn't until hours after the call. So there would have been time for police to get there if she'd been able to answer the call. She's also not sure if her follow-up call was what set him off. I was only an operator for a few months. The one I think about most frequently was a homeless man who called saying someone had shot his dog while he was away. He mentioned how that dog was his best friend. What sucked the most about this call, from my end, was that we were getting tons of other calls while I was talking to him. I wanted to listen to him to help him grieve, but I had to wrap the call up quickly so I could continue answering calls. That hurt me. Not an operator but a first responder. One of the things that I hear our operators have a hard time with is zero follow-up. Once we get on scene they hang up and hope for the best. Did they make it? Did family know? How bad was it? Sometimes it can be worse than actually being there. The what ifs can wreck your psyche. A friend of mine was a 911 operator. She had gotten a call from a guy on Valentine's Day last year because his wife had hung herself. Poor dude was so distraught she almost couldn't understand him through the tears. Wherever he is, I hope he gets a hug today. I just quit in January but I was a 911 operator for 6.5 years. The call that sticks out as the worst is a murder that was actively happening. A son in his 40s was drunk and stabbed his mother, who was in her 60s, to death while her husband dialed 911. You could hear the grunting and the mother and father begging us to hurry, and the just screaming. When police arrived the mother was dead, and the father was still trying to pull the son off of his mother. Total response time was around 4 minutes. Son was sentenced to 40 years. My wife used to be a dispatcher and she had 2 calls that really stuck with her. A drunk man drove his car into a pond and could not get out of the vehicle. He seemed too drunk to be able to follow her instructions and she ended up staying on the phone with him long enough to hear him taking his last gasps of air. It took the police department 2 days to find his vehicle based off triangulation. A call came in from a woman that said her ex-husband was banging on the front door with the intention of killing her. She said that she first had called her parents to let them know before calling the police. My wife listened to this man get into the home and murder her. He went on to drive to her parents' house with the intention of killing them, but they had crossed paths on the way to their daughter's house. The husband ended up shooting himself in the head on her parents' doorstep. That call she made saved their lives. Suicide line. He died. Oh my god, he died. Miss, are you alright? He's dead. He was killed. Who died, miss? Do you hear me? If you are in danger and can't talk, press a number on your phone. I'm calling my supervisor at that time. I needed his agreement to call the police. Miss, do you hear me? I'm sorry. Couldn't make out what she said. It will be alright, miss. Just tell me where you... What was that? Are you injured? Answer me. At that point I was shaking and my supervisor took the call and told me to go to the break room. After the worst hour of my life, he came to see me. The police had found a body in the apartment. Gunshot wound to the head with an hunting rifle. Phone still on the line. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. The police treated this as a suicide. They didn't find another body. I still have no idea what she was talking about or even if it was real, but I quit that day. I can still hear her voice and that horrible gunshot. Worst regrets is that I don't even know who she was, what had driven her to that point, or can't even remember her last words. If I had called the police sooner. Thank you, Renault, for maintaining the suicide line. You joked about it but you save lives. You made my 5 months with you a blessing even with that terrible end. Suicidal calls are usually the worst. Most just want someone to talk to and ask for help, but there are others who have made up their mind and just want emergency services to find them before their family does. You try to keep them talking long enough but it doesn't always work. Definitely calls from family who did find them are the worst. Saddest call was similar, but was a woman who stopped mid-call and asked me, "Do you really care about the people you talk to?" Hard to explain the tone in her voice, but it was really sad. I took a 911 call a few years back. It was a hysterical woman reporting that her son had just called her to let her know that he'd gotten into a fight with his ex and had thrown their 3-year-old son off a bridge. I've been doing this for 15 years and counting, and that call still haunts me. I am not a 112 operator, but my uncle is, and this is a story he told us. A little girl crying and saying that her dad was beating her mom. She was only 8 years old and yet she knew to call the authorities. At some point a man yelled, "What are you doing? Give me the phone." And she started screaming. By the time the police arrived, the mother and the daughter had been killed, and the father hanged himself. My sister used to be one. She told the worst thing was hearing someone die on the phone. There had been a serious car crash and the lady who called was severely injured herself. My sister tried to keep her talking until the ambulance arrived, but at some point the woman fell quiet. Later heard that she had died on spot. The house across from me exploded. Parked car in garage had faulty wiring. Caught stuff in the garage on fire. When I called 911 and gave the address of the house on fire, there was a moment of silence. The operator then told me that it was her house which was currently burning down. Thankfully no one was harmed. Babies. The worst calls are always with babies and children. Dead infant that shared a bed with other children and suffocated. Mom screaming in the background. Mom catching dad molesting their daughter. 14 years and so many bad calls. Previous 911 operator from North Dakota here in the United States. I had a call from some frantic parents of children saying that the woman who was driving them, their aunt, was supposed to have driven them to school for their choir concert. Children were both under the age of 5. They said the kids were no-shows, and when they called the aunt to see where they were, the children answered crying and panicked. No idea where they were, but they said the driver fell asleep. We now know that she passed out from a diabetic blood sugar crash. The vehicle was still upright but off the road. Before the parents could walk the kids through calling 911, their phone died. Took over 40 minutes for Verizon to call back with a ping location. Children were in the car for over an hour with a dead woman, unable to do anything but wait. Kids were okay though. Thankfully the wreck wasn't bad and the weather was warm. Is 112 the same as 911? I'm in the UK and answered emergency ambulance calls. Lots of sad and scary stories. I once took a call from a woman in her 50s who went to see why her son in his 20s hadn't come down for breakfast. She went up to check on him and found that he choked on vomit. They didn't know why he'd vomited, no alcohol or drugs in his system, and died. His bedroom was next to hers and she was so devastated that he was so close to her and she hadn't been able to help him. His age and the way she was trying so hard to talk to me without bursting into tears absolutely destroyed me. This was over 6 months ago and I still think about it regularly. Took a phone call from a guy who'd been in a car accident with his very pregnant wife. Neither the baby nor the mother survived, unfortunately. The guy was in shock and quite calm initially but eventually broke down on the phone and I had to get a manager to step in and take over due to being so upset myself. A girl, maybe 15 I think, found her dad collapsed on the floor when she got home from school. I talked her through chest compressions until the ambulance arrived. Tried my best to keep her calm but she screamed and cried, begging for help. She did an incredible job but I believe her dad died in the end. I don't do the job anymore, found the shifts to be unsuitable for me, but ultimately the emotional nature of the job was too much and left me exhausted. My aunt is a 911 operator and she told me about a time a guy called her freaking out. His cats were talking to him. Turns out this 90-year-old man took a ton of shrooms and was freaking out. I needed this break in the madness of this thread. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.